Let's look at an example of anecdote in writing, in this case, a speech. In November 2013, Michelle Obama gave a speech to high school sophomores in Washington, D.C. And in order to understand why she's using anecdote, we must consider the rhetorical situation, which you should always do when looking at any rhetorical strategy. The subject in this case is higher education. The occasion was in 2013 uh, at Bell Multicultural High School with majority low-income students. The exigence is that this was an opening speech in her campaign for pursuing higher education. So this was the kickoff event. The background of this speech is that students of low-income families disproportionately do not pursue or get into college or trade school. And so she is speaking to high school sophomores of that majority BIPOC low income population. The purpose of this speech is to encourage high schoolers to seize opportunities to fulfill her dreams and to really understand where Michelle Obama is coming from. You got to know who she is. So, an award winning writer, she's former First Lady of the United States who graduated with a BA from Princeton University and a JD from Harvard University after growing up in a working class family and faced obstacles before graduating college. Now, in their speech, she says, "See, I went to a great school, but at my school we had so many kids, so few guidance counselors. They were dealing with hundreds of students. Plus, I knew I couldn't afford to go on a bunch of college visits. I couldn't hire a personal tutor. I couldn't enroll in SAT prep classes. We didn't have the money." Now, in this part of her anecdote, she establishes the factors that prevented her from pursuing higher education. And then, get this. Some of my teachers straight up told me that I was setting my sights too high. They told me I was never going to get into a school like Princeton, and I still hear that doubt ringing in my head. So it was clear to me that nobody was going to take my hand and lead me to where I needed to go. And she describes a personal example of one of those factors that almost preventing her from pursuing higher education. But we know how that turned out. In this last part of her anecdote, she says, "When I encountered doubters, when people told me I wasn't going to cut it, I didn't let that stop me. In fact, I did the opposite. I used that negativity to fuel me, to keep me going. And at the end, I got into Princeton, and that was one of the proudest days of my life." And she explains how she used that personal story to motivate her to pursue her dreams. And she uses many anecdotes in this speech, both her own and of others, to drive this point home. And so, if we were to take all of that together, all of the parts of the anecdotes and the purpose of each part of the anecdote, um, we have to consider what the use of personal anecdotes is overall. And she says, and we would put it in this sentence: Michelle Obama uses personal anecdotes with overcoming barriers towards higher education in order to establish a connection between her and high school sophomores. So we specify the type of anecdote she's using, so what details about that anecdote, and we also introduce the purpose of this anecdote. And we're going to get into how we can effectively analyze an anecdote in a speech or other part of text more in detail and probably with a little bit more uh, analysis than this.